and people want to misunderstand because of what they stand for. So the first question to you I would like to ask is, do you think he is really misunderstood or is over-understood, and who is he most misunderstood by, the left or the right?
Yeah. Thank you, Jaggi. A very good afternoon, everyone. I think one of the most contentious political thinkers of the early 20th century, who intrudes modern political discourse like very few other characters of the past do, is this man Vinayak Damodar Savarkar. And for the last 3 years that I have been researching about him, and the first volume of the book that's come out, I realized that people who are both his proponents as well as his opponents, they know so little about him. The last book that was written on his life, a comprehensive biography, was way back in the 1960s, 70s by this man called Dhananjay Keer. And I wonder, every election there's mention about him. There's someone from the Congress who brings him up. We had, all this discussion about whether he needs to be given the Bharat Ratna. So every election he's a hot potato, a hot topic. But then actual scholarly work or research about him is so little. And so like that famous quote of Toni Morrison, who said, if there's a book that you want to read and it's not been written, you must be the one to write it. So that's why I decided I should plunge myself into writing about him. About your question whether he's understood, over understood, misunderstood, I think a little of all of that. I think the left, so-called left, and the so-called right in India, both of them misunderstand the man. The left, of course, for obvious reasons, because he's the object of hate, an object of their calumny for so many decades now. And interestingly, I think even the so-called right in India doesn't quite understand Savarkar to the extent that they should, because a lot of what he wrote, his philosophy, which I discovered in the course of my research, and we could talk about that, is something that today's current Indian right would also be quite uncomfortable with. His views on the caste system, his views on cows, all of this. So selectively they would like to appropriate some parts of his legacy, but by and large may not be completely. But then I think the bulk of the misunderstanding comes from the leftist historian group, and which is why we've not had any books written on him with a modern perspective. I think history always needs a revision, a relook, and I often wonder why he has escaped that re-evaluation in all these years.
To take off on one of the points you briefly mentioned, that in the recent political discourse, and especially before the Maharashtra election, some political parties raised the issues that he should be given the Bharat Ratna. Do you think he is deserving of it, or should we leave him out of this discussion?
I mean, who are we to discuss who deserves a Bharat Ratna or not? But then it's, I think, very symbolic, the whole thing. And I mean, I don't want to get into the politics of it at all. It's obviously done with an eye on the elections. And both the Shiv Sena and the BJP have their competing politics. It was, in fact, Mr. Uddhav Thackeray at my book launch. He let the cat among the pigeons, so to say, by saying he should get the Bharat Ratna, and the BJP followed up with it in its manifesto. Now both of them have won enough number of seats, so let's see whether they'll keep up their promise. Though they had 5 years to do this, and I don't know why they didn't do it. I don't think it would matter to the man or even his family, who suffered quite a lot, in terms of sacrifice for the cause of Indian freedom. But then I think it's symbolic in terms of the fact that for the longest period of time, awards like this, civilian awards, the highest awards, have been the preserve of one particular ideology, one particular family, and it's now alternative narratives. I think that is what will get prominence if he gets an award, where there is an alternative narrative to our freedom struggle. We have always been hammered down this monochromatic narrative that there's been a non-violent struggle, which is what led us to our freedom. But in the course of my research, I realized that there are multiple other voices which have been willfully suppressed, which have not got its due. And this would be in some way a recognition, I feel, of that. Otherwise, whether or not someone gets it, and that too posthumously so many years after he died in 1966, would hardly make a difference to him or his family.
If we just go back, your book deals with more or less the first half of his life, till he comes to his philosophy of Hindutva.
Right.
He started out being reinterpreted 1857 to be a war of independence rather than just a mutiny.
True.
Right? So he wrote about that, and in that he talks about how Hindus and Muslims can actually work together and be unity.
Yeah.
What were the turning points in his life or the incidents in his life that you think turned him from the man who wrote 1857 and the man who wrote Hindutva? What were the turning points you think that made him feel that Hindutva is necessary?
That's a loaded question, and with the time, I don't know how we'll cover that. But then, a little perspective about the man. He was someone who started India's first secret society, which was called the Mitra Mela, which later became the Abhinav Bharat. A coordinated attempt of creating, armed revolt in the army, drawing from the 1857 model of creating that disaffection in the British Indian Army, so that is what the armed revolutionaries felt would get us independence, and inspired by several revolutionaries whose names we wouldn't even know, Vasudev Balwant Phadke, the Chafekar brothers in Maharashtra, and that is what led him into this whole idea of revolution. And as you rightly said, the 5 years that he spent in London as a student of law, that's when he decided, 2 years in that he spent researching at the British Library, actually accessing all the original documents of the 1857 uprising, which till then the British actually disparagingly called Sepoy Mutiny, whereas he put that whole history in an Indian perspective and also coined this phrase of the first war of Indian independence. And that book itself becomes a seminal book. It becomes almost a book which inspires revolutionaries much later. Bhagat Singh publishes a second edition of that book. He makes it an entry criteria for people into the HSRA many years later. And 20 years later, even Rash Bihari Bose and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose as well, they get copies of this book published in Japanese. There are Tamil copies of that book on 1857, which is found in INA raids, Tamil versions with this man called Jaimani Subramanian, who's a PR agent of the INA. So for so many decades after it was written in 1908-09, after so many decades, it still continued to inspire revolutionaries. So, but your other question on this whole idea of, so while in London also, if you read his speeches, he talks about India being a rainbow, where Hindus, Muslims, Parsis, Jains, all of them add to the, beauty of the rainbow and so on. I feel the turning point, two turning points that come, and we could discuss that more. One is, of course, his entire experience in the cellular jail, the Kala Pani incarceration that he suffered for 11 years, and the kind of treatment that was meted there. Particularly, the British policy also of divide and rule, and how they used the Muslim jamadars, the jailers, against the Hindu prisoners to get them easily converted, or to lessen the kind of tortures that they were facing, the prisoners, if they converted to Islam. And there was no way in Hinduism to get these converts back into the fold. And so he started the Shuddhi movement there, inspired by the Arya Samaj and so on. So that was one, I think, turning point. The second and more important one, according to me, was this very dangerous game that was being played in India at that time of the Khilafat movement, which Mahatma Gandhi, of course, launched with all the good intentions of creating Hindu-Muslim unity and so on, and to bring a community into the freedom struggle. But the kind of pernicious effect, I think, that it had, where we are mobilizing communally an entire group of people in this country to fight for a cause which is thousands of kilometers away and which has no relevance, so to say, to Indian freedom, and the kind of impact that had in terms of communal violence in different parts of India, the Mopla carnage in Malabar, in Gulbarga, Kohat, Panipat, Calcutta, Delhi, and so on. And every time that happened, the response of the Congress and particularly of Gandhi was so pusillanimous that somewhere also needed somebody to give an intellectual response. In neighboring Kerala, you had the Mopla carnage, where in broad daylight thousands and thousands of Nayars were massacred. It was a genocide and nothing less than that. Women were raped, pregnant women were assaulted, and children were killed. And in response, Gandhi says the Moplas were brave soldiers who were fighting for the cause of their religion. And a few years later, when Swami Shraddhanand of the Arya Samaj is murdered by Abdul Rashid, he again says, "My dear brother Abdul Rashid, I don't even consider him as the assassin. We have to get into the psyche of the murderer," and all those things. So what in today's parlance we would call appeasement, I think it was happening to such an extent and such an alarmist extent, and so it needed somebody to give an intellectual counter. So I would always say his treatise, a very slim volume called Essentials of Hindutva, which was written in jail in 1923 from Ratnagiri, was his first intellectual salvo against Gandhi, with whom he had a running feud all his life, an intellectual opposition, and which kind of put in perspective whom he defined as a culturally, and nationalistic marker of an Indian.
Just to go back a little, can you tell us a little about his Andaman's experience, the kind of conditions he faced, and especially in the context of a later leftist critic, which says that okay, he was a coward. Actually, he was busy signing mercy petitions. Can you put both of these in context? I mean, your book says some of that. I thought you would explain it to the audience.
Sure. So this man is a young man. Just imagine he's in his 20s, a very talented person who goes on a scholarship to London to study law, and there for 5 years he becomes the kingpin of revolution across Europe. And then the British is so scared of him, they actually term him as a D category or a dangerous criminal. They put a very unfair Fugitive and Offenders Act on him, which he's not a fugitive, he's a bona fide student who's gone there on a scholarship. He's extradited to India because the sedition laws were so strong here, like they are now as well in those days, whereas in Europe it was easy to carry anti-government propaganda. They bring him here, he's denied a proper jury or an appeal or anything, and he's given the longest sentence of 2 life imprisonments, accounting to 50 long years. He was 27 years old. If he survived and came out, he would be 77 years old then. And the kind of brutality, that him and several other political prisoners they faced, which they write in their memoirs and which I write too in my book, are heart-wrenching. And it's so sad these things have not become part of our history textbooks. Basic human facilities of, say, good food or toilet facilities are not given to these prisoners. There are only fixed times in the day that you can go to the toilet. And the food that you're given is full of reptiles and insects. So eating most of them used to end up with diarrhea. And because they were fixed time to go to the toilet, if you ask the prisoner to go, the jailer to take you, he would not let. So most of them would end up defecating in their cells and sit and eat and sleep amidst the squalor, that they had, and standing handcuffs position for several weeks and months. Savarkar himself had solitary confinement for 6 months. The only human contact he had was the gallows in front of him, where every day he would see people being shouting and screaming, being taken to be hanged. And then this most torturous thing of Kolhu, where the oil grinding mill, where instead of the bullock, the freedom fighter is yoked to it, and they had to go round and round in that heat of Port Blair with rashes on your skin, with leeches biting you, but no medical treatment given to you. And at the end of the day, you had to extract 30 pounds of oil. Now, if you don't do that, you're flogged, you're not given food, which they anyway did not want to eat. So this kind of torture was what all of them got. It's another issue that today, Britain talks to us about human rights and all of that, but this was the hellhole that they had set up for our political prisoners, our freedom fighters. Now, in that context, this whole idea of mercy petition, I would not call it a mercy petition, I would call it a petition. It was a normal agency that was available to any political prisoner to secure release. Now, many say, oh, but Bhagat Singh did not claim for that, but he was being executed. If Savarkar was given this thing of being hanged, I don't know whether he would be also sending a petition. That is open to conjecture. Prisoner cannot choose the punishment that is meted on him. But anybody who's given a life imprisonment was given this option legally to sign a petition. And Savarkar repeatedly in his petitions was also acting as a spokesperson for all the other political prisoners who were lodged in the jail, and they all used to call him Bada Babu. Now, he was this English educated lawyer who was who knew the law, who knew how to fight for all their behalf. So in fact, in his 1917 petition, he says, if my name constitutes an obstacle to the release of all the other political prisoners, you can omit my name and release the others, and that would give me as much happiness as my own release would secure. So some would call it a tactic. What is the point being holed in that hellhole that I just described? Better to get out and then regroup. And several others followed his idea, including Sachindranath Sanyal, who signed a petition. He goes out and conditions are put that you won't participate in politics, but you can break those conditions after you go out. And then he forms the HRA and gets into the Kakori case and so on. So many others, Barin Ghosh, Ulaskar Dutt, all of these people along with Savarkar filed petitions. And most interestingly, in 1920, when Savarkar's younger brother goes and approaches Mahatma Gandhi and asks him to intervene for help, Gandhi himself advises him, ask your brother to go and file a petition. And I will also file a petition on his behalf. And Gandhi files it. It's there in Young India, where he files a petition on Savarkar's behalf saying they are brave men and they've suffered enough, so release them now, I think it's enough, and so on. So in the larger issue of clemency that people have even now, that's how this was being accessed. But to put that all up as, you know, someone who was covering and who was a coward and a collaborator, I think that's being a little unfair to the person, and also to all the others also who signed the petition, who underwent the tortures that I just described.
So in short, basically, if we face 1/10 the torture, we would be signing even more mercy petitions. I think.
Of course, of course.
So let's come to the Veer part of Savarkar. I think a recent Rajasthan textbook actually tried to erase the Veer part. We see him as a revolutionary, or at least your book says there is a strong revolutionary element to him.
Yeah.
So what made him a revolutionary, apart from his early days in terms of organizing all these secret societies and all? What is he revolutionary in what?
Right.
In what sense, in what context?
I mean, your first part on politicians and textbooks, I think better to keep off that, especially when it comes to a topic like history. We have our controversy here where Tipu Sultan should be removed from the textbook and all that, which is so foolish. We can't wish away our history. Similarly, the man was brave. He was always called Veer Savarkar. It's not up to a government or a political party to put a name or prefix or suffix a name. Now, the revolutionary zeal was something that, as I said, it was instilled in his heart, way early in his life, in his childhood, where the environment in which he grew in a Chitpavan Brahmin family in Nashik. And Chitpavan Brahmins were the ones who were at the forefront of a lot of, revolutionary movements, freedom struggle, whether it was Tilak or Gokhale, all of them were from the same community. So his father also was someone who inspired him. But the turning point was the assassination, the execution of the Chafikar brothers, who were executed by the British, and that changed him. And he takes this vow in front of the idol of his family deity of Bhavani, saying, "I am going to fight the enemy till my last breath and die." And that never stopped. As I said, the Mitra Mela, the Abhinav Bharat gets formed, and the 5 years that he was in London, in the India House, that becomes a hotbed of revolutionaries, what the British would call seditionists, and such fantastic characters whom again we have forgotten, Shamji Krishna Varma, Madam Bhikaji Kama, who unfurled the first flag of Indian independence in the International Socialist Congress in Stuttgart in 1907, the flag that was actually designed by Savarkar, Virendranath Chattopadhyay, Sardar Singh Rana, Madan Lal Dhingra, Lala Hardayal, who formed the Gadar party, Sukhsagar Dutt, MPT Acharya, VVS Iyer. Now, fascinating characters who's played such an important part in our freedom struggle, and in that revolutionary zeal particularly, he was the kingpin, the intellectual corpus he provided in terms of that 1857 book, and also in smuggling out bomb manuals to India, smuggling pistols and bombs to India to carry on political assassinations and all of that. And that is the only reason. The pen is mightier than the sword, and that's a good thing to have in a lit fest, I think, for authors, that the pen is indeed mightier than the sword, and which is why the British feared him mortally, and they called him D category or dangerous criminal, and wanted him far, far away from the Indian mainland, because Sachindranath Sanyal also writes that, we wrote a petition, we were released, but Savarkar brothers were not, because the British feared them, and they thought releasing him would actually rekindle the revolutionary zeal in the Bombay presidency that had fizzled out. So, and that revolutionary spirit continued, though not overtly, but covertly, where he influenced Bhagat Singh later. And as I said, there's also a lot of evidence, which I'll be putting out in my second book, on how he influenced the Indian National Army and Subhash Chandra Bose to get people to enlist into the British Indian Army and then defect to the INA. And we all know, I mean, what are the reasons for India to get free, whether it was Quit India, whether it was the naval mutiny of Bombay of 1946. I think that judgment is still out.
Yeah, two things. One that may rile the left, one the left may be uncomfortable with, and the right the other. One is caste. Right? The left never likes to talk about the fact that he was very strongly against caste.
Yeah.
And the right does not like what he had said about the cow. In the context of today's cow, vegetarianism and other things.
Yes.
Why? What are the two key points in this thing? I think I'll ask you one more question that also you can answer. Then we'll throw the questions open to the audience.
Yeah.
The last thing is why did he define his Hindutva in territorial terms and not necessarily religious terms?
Yeah.
In which case, which is how some of the current people are using.
Right. Sure.
3 questions.
3 questions and 7 minutes the ticker is showing. So in terms of caste, I mean, there's so much misrepresentation and misunderstood Messiah, as he's called here. People say, oh, he was Manuvadi, he was proponent of the caste system, but here was a man whose views were so much in consonance with Ambedkar, and if you actually see their writings, both of them had healthy appreciation for each other. He had called for a complete dismantling of the caste system and said, I don't believe in the caste system, though he was himself from an upper caste Brahmin family, stood for intercaste dining, intercaste marriage, established the first Patit Pavan Mandir in Ratnagiri in 1931, which was open to all communities. And unlike what Gandhi says, around the same time, where he says, I don't think the caste system is odious, and I think the Varnashram system is the bedrock of Hinduism and all that. Whereas these two men were completely on a different tangent of being a nihilist, so to say, complete, a dismantling. On the cow, interestingly, the icon of Hindutva, who says that I don't consider the cow as something divine. I don't personally believe in worshipping the cow. If someone else wants to, they can. But then cow protection is more important. And when there is a trade-off between an animal and a human being, I think the human being needs to take precedence. And he was a utilitarian all the time. So make use of the cow. It's a useful animal. So like America has done animal husbandry and milk production, how to increase. You do that, but then don't worship her, because we become the god we worship. So if we worship a docile animal, we will also be as docile. So Hindutva's god should be Narasimha, was what he wrote about. And he says Krishna is also called Go Pala, someone who protects the cow and not someone who worships the cow. But then if you still want to, that's your wish. And every time your opponent has used the cow as a shield in wars and so on, so that you won't fire the arrows because there's a cow on the other side. In the process, you're losing your nation. So is it better not to give up your crazy obsession with the... So I'm sure something like these mob lynchings that are happening today, he would have been someone who would have strictly opposed that tooth and nail. The last point of territorial thing of Hindutva, in that Essentials of Hindutva, the first paragraph itself says, my Hindutva is not about Hinduism, the theology of Hinduism. He was anti-caste, anti-religion, an atheist. So he said it had nothing to do with the religion of Hinduism. Hinduism is a small subsect. But in the context of that Khilafat that I spoke about, where, a caliphate is displaced in Turkey, where the people of Turkey want that Sultan out, and Mustafa Kemal Ataturk comes on to take power. And here you're mobilizing an entire group of Muslims saying that, we will help you. And Gandhi had promised that within 1 year, the caliphate will be established and you will also get Swaraj. Now, neither of it happened, because the British were not obliged to actually establish, a caliphate in a country which they had conquered by war, just because some random people were raising flags in a colony, So the entire logic was so flawed, and so his entire description of sacred geography, anybody who considers this land as the land of his ancestors, where again there is a misinterpretation. Pitrubhu, they say, oh, but that is fatherland, and so it's Nazi. Pitru is not father, it's your ancestors, so it's the land of our ancestors, and who considers this as a holy land. And holy, again, not in the religious context, but as something that is reverential. And what is wrong in being reverential or loyal or dedicated to your country, and not extraterritorial allegiances. More in terms of today, when we're talking about sovereignty of nations and so on, our first allegiance to our country, and that's how he defines a Hindu. And that could be anybody. It's not a religious marker, but a cultural and a nationalistic marker, or an identity.
Right. Quick time for 1 or 2 questions. Yeah, please, will somebody pass the mic quickly? And please ask questions, don't make comments. I will move on to the next guy in case you make a lecture on when you met Savarkar or his granduncle.
We only have 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Hi Vikram, myself Shahim.
Yeah.
Sir, in 1944, Tom Trainer writes about Savarkar in his interview with Savarkar that he asked Savarkar, how would you like to treat the Muslims in your country, in an independent India? And he replies back, like how
Negroes.
to treat Negroes in your country. So he's actually Savarkar, he misunderstood Messiah And is his Hindutva ideology actually an inclusive ideology which is relevant in the present 21st century Indian democratic setup? Thanks.
Correct. So as I said, it was inclusive in the sense that he said anybody who considers this land as a holy land and that of his ancestors is a Hindu, not in terms of religion, but they could be Muslim, Christian, Jain, Parsi, but still you would be recognized that way. And in that also he writes, be it a Brahmin or a Nair or a tribal person in Andaman, we all have the same blood, we all have the same DNA. So intercaste marriage, intercaste dining, all this should not be a problem. So yes, inclusivity was very much a part of that. Now coming to that issue, he himself clarified that he had not said that, and if you actually read his manifesto, Hindu Rashtra Darshan, what was his idea of a Hindu Rashtra, which is again much misunderstood, and there's a different version of the RSS, and people don't realize that Savarkar was never a part of the RSS. He was always a part of the Hindu Mahasabha. They misunderstandingly both are intermingled. So he says, my vision of a free India is one where every citizen is free, is same in the eyes of the law, irrespective of religion, caste, race, gender. A majority will not get extra privileges because he or she is a majority. Similarly, a minority person will not get any extra privileges only because he's a minority. So justice for all and appeasement of none.
One more question before you write. Yeah. Yeah.
Hello, Vikram.
The last question, we'll handle it. We'll have to go. Yeah.
Hello, Vikram. I'm Jayati.
Okay.
I completed you're reading your book.
I can't see.
I completed reading your
Question,
book last
please, question.
week. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
My question. You have included the appendix there, the writings of Savarkar. I would like to know why. Because are the writings not available publicly? That is one. And second, in your book you have included the writings of the appendix. Why? And second thing is about the research. If you can for the book, if you can throw some light. Yeah.
Yes, I have 15 seconds. I will say, yes, sources largely, lots of his writing was in Marathi. And one more sad part of the misunderstanding is most of the leftist historians who've written about him have never accessed the originals which he wrote in Marathi. And luckily I can read, understand Marathi, and so that's one reason I translated a lot of this, actually read what the man was talking himself, and got those in the appendix. Now in terms of other sources, 3 years was what I spent at the archives in London, the British Library archives in France, Germany, where there's lots of material about Indian revolutionary movement there during the First World War period, and then the National Archives, the Nehru Memorial, where all his private papers are sitting, 40,000 pages, which very few historians have actually accessed till date. The Pune Library, the Maharashtra State Archives in Bombay, interviews with his opponents, proponents, and that's how this whole book, got put together.
Thank you, everybody. And
Thank you.
Vikram, for
Thank you.
insightful conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.